Link's poor play and CLG's subsequent fairly embarrassing loss overall in the final of IEM Cologne has led to what's been a fairly popular trend over the last few months whenever CLG and the topic of Link have been brought up, which is heavy criticism, quite a lot of scrutiny on Link himself, a mixture of jokes leading through to people saying maybe he shouldn't be on the team anymore, to people with sometimes quite vitriolic, quite hyperbolic statements. Maybe they hate him, they think he's an idiot, he's a loser, whatever, however far they want to go in that respect. There's a wide spectrum, and it's kind of an onslaught of this sort of stuff. And so you can tell if someone Link went on Reddit now, or they looked at Twitter, or whatever it would be, it might be quite distressing, it might be unpleasant, it might start to feel like it's unfair, feel frustrated with their problems, and maybe they would term all this as hate. And I notice that's actually a particular thing amongst pros, is they'll just label it as hate, and they'll say, oh, Reddit does this and Twitter, and people are ignorant and they just hate on me and it's unfair, and why does it have to be this way, can't we just be nice and all get along, and all that sort of stuff. And so some players that this has famously happened to, Link's a very recent example, but you have to remember before Nian Tonso stepped down from CLG, he was someone who had some of this criticism when they had the not so good split where they finished 5th to 6th place in the summer, and then they finished 3rd overall, but clearly something was lacking. A position needed to be potentially upgraded maybe for them to do better. So he was someone who people were looking at and wasn't a star player. Going back further than that, Wicked, famously ever since CLG turned to Evil Geniuses and then later in Alliance, he's been targeted because of strange builds, an attitude that makes it sound sometimes like maybe he's frivolent. He just doesn't care about other people's opinions. He's kind of very nonchalant, very glib in that sense. Or maybe he would say comments that sounded like he thought he was one of the best players, and so if he was doing badly, people would sort of use that as like, oh, you think you're one of the best, and then jump on him, you idiot, you did this wrong in this one. A more famous example even still would maybe be Genja, because crucially, yeah, he was the great innovator early on, and people would look at it and be like, wow, what is he trying to do there? But in later years, when the team fell off a lot and his skill had fallen off a bit, now if he did a silly build, I mean, famously buying the Stinger in those 2 games against KT Bullets in the semi-final of IEM, people were literally like, oh, you idiot, that doesn't make any sense, you cost them the game, like, it's your fault, why? Or even a bronze guy would build the glass, they became quite vitriolic, especially someone like Genja, someone we barely had any contact with in the Western-speaking world. To give a really good example that I'm sure people have forgotten about now, everyone loves Hotshot now, and people only ever criticize him now in his capacity as the owner of CLG. But when he was a player, right up until the end, so before Nien came in, man, people went hard at him on Season 3 because they knew he was the owner, and clearly it was the case that part of the reason he was still playing in that was because he was the owner, so he got to have some kind of luxury and some say in that, where he's not going to cut himself from his own team. Whereas actually, just based on skill, maybe he would have been cut 6 months earlier or 8 months earlier or whatever the scenarios, or forced to step down. So because of this, people felt like he was a bit entitled maybe, or they felt like, oh, so does he think he's good when he's not really, people went pretty hard, and yeah, they've come around on that one, so you don't remember it as much now. But no, these are all players who've had their share of this hatred or this heavy criticism, this heavy scrutiny. And so what I want to do here is kind of unpack this aspect, because I don't think it's fair to just bundle it all up as hate and then put it over there, and then everyone who's ever said anything even vaguely critical on it is a total piece of shit, and or we're supposed to all go the other way, and the only good people, whatever the fuck good means, the only productive or acceptable members of society in our culture, in this particular community, are the ones that are saying, oh, he's a good player, he did his best, yeah, he tried. Like, it's not one or the other of these ridiculous extremes. And so, first things first, let's separate out this hate into the world of criticism, and then we'll go back into the world of hate later to examine what real hate is. So first of all, solely criticizing someone's play as a professional esports player in a competitive setting is not hate. Like, if someone says, like, say their comment about Link was, oh, his play on Orianna was quite poor, like, he's famous for going back to that, his like safety pick as the mid laner, which is actually a famous mid pick in that scenario. It's like the panic pick of like, oh, I'm not sure what to do, I'll just go on Orianna and just be safe, just farm. In that scenario, yeah, his play was really quite poor, and some of the scenarios he died straight up in were quite baffling. And just as a player, that was poor play. It was well below the par of what people expect from him, of what he's expected in his team. It was quite, if someone phrases it all like that, that's not even vaguely approaching hate. And I just want to make this point here. People bundle this together where they think that if you criticize that, or then you criticize him within the context of CLG, or you maybe even criticize him as a person, you say, oh, it seems like he chokes a lot, that you're somehow, even if either you are directly hating on him, or even worse, It's that you're in some way contributing to the snowball of hate from all the others. Now, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. That's like saying to be critical of someone who happens to be black is the same as being is in some way contributing to then when a racist guy stands up after you say that and say, yeah, and he should be killed as well. Like, no, you're in no way responsible for what that guy did, nor is anything you've just said backing up what he's saying or allied with it whatsoever. You both just happen to be criticizing in a totally different way, him in a totally hateful way, you in perhaps a totally objective, non-racist, non-stereotypical manner, the same person. You just both happen to be saying something to the same person. And in fact, the two things don't connect and there's no force between them where it becomes this snowball of hate. One is a terrible thing that it maybe becomes its own snowball of hate and horrible things. The other can exist entirely separately and doesn't connect to that at all. And if it gets conflated, then I'm actually a bit suspicious of who's doing the conflating. Is it fans of that person? Is it the person themselves? In that case, they're being quite unfair about how they're treating these other people who are maybe had valid opinions to state. Likewise, not only can you criticize the play, but also another crucial aspect that people often get confused about is you can definitely criticize someone on the basis of their position in the context of their team. And when I say position by that, I mean if someone is put in a position where they're supposed to be a carry or a star and they're in a good team, you can most definitely criticize that on the grounds of the fact that, well, are they actually playing up to the role of the star, of what the team needs? Crucially, in the context of the team, the resources, the history, the other players, are they actually performing to the level that is needed within that team to be where it's supposed to be? So famously, I have thought some of the TSM criticisms from people within the team themselves, like Reginald, etc., and some of the fans, have sometimes gone too far. Like I've seen times where it bordered on bullying in terms of how fans treated Dyrus when he would lose at international tournaments, or how Reggie sometimes did in the first split of LCS in 2013 when they lost certain games where, yeah, Dyrus made a mistake at the end, but there were other mistakes before them that put them in that situation. Yes, sometimes I felt it went a bit too far, but I at least always understood and to a small degree respected at least that the impulse making people criticize in quite a scrutinous manner there was that if you're in TSM, the minimum you can do is come top 2, and actually with their resources and their history and legacy of winning and pedigree, they should be winning. So if they're not winning, something is wrong, and actually you should be held to that accountable status. You're not playing on velocity when you play in TSM, so it doesn't matter if you have a great game and sometimes you do well, you're in TSM. We need you to do this at this job. The team has to get to this place. Everyone has to do this. And you have to be good individual. All these factors have to be there. So that in itself is an entirely valid way of criticizing again. So in this particular scenario, to give the example of Link, since he's a famous example now, in the case of Link, he's the starting mid laner on a team that used to have Big Fat LP. When once upon a time, Big Fat LP might have been the best player in the world, Season 1. He's on CLG, a team that famously was the best team in the world and then have been top 3 in the world at certain times and then top 3 in NA all the time. And even if now, yes, they've had all these 5th and 6th places in LCS, and so really in that sense they're not relevant in the modern context, the legacy is still there, and in theory the budget and certain players on the team where they should be able to be there. The expectation for them should be a minimum of top 3. I would even say for a team like them, okay, maybe they're not quite at the TSM stats anymore, but I think for TSM, CLG, Curse and Cloud9, those 4 teams should always, I would say Dignitas as well, but they've been a bit questionable. Maybe add them as a 5th one. Those 5 should always have the goal of top 3. And actually the best ones, Cloud9, TSM, really the goal shouldn't even be winning NA anymore. You should be finishing top 4 in the world. That should really be your goal. It should be everything you're going for. And just winning NA and just making worlds, these should be like small markers along the way. And so within those contexts, you now can criticise, for example, High in a wonderful team like Cloud9 that are amazing in NA. You definitely can criticise him in the context not only of his individual play, but then his position within this team. Is he the best player? Could we get a better player here? Think of it in a sports context. If a team, so famous examples might be the Knicks, or a few years before that, the Magic in basketball. If some of these teams sign players who they want to do a certain role, like starting point guard, but actually they're not quite good enough, or they just spent too much money. If a really good example of this is the player Rashard Lewis, who used to play for the Orlando Magic, where he had one good season and they'd given him like a max contract, and he just was not even close to that for the seasons afterwards. So yeah, even if he was still a good player, like at his position later years, he still might have been like top 10 at his position, top 15. They were paying him max money, which is where you're supposed to be like top 5 at your position, or maybe top 5 in the entire NBA at that sort of level. So in that context, here's the thing: you can criticize the player, but if you do it there to kind of say something to fan criticism here, it's a bit unfair to that player to make all of the hate and all of the criticism, or however you want to phrase it, directed at the player as if he should listen to you and what you're saying. In that particular scenario where we're talking about his position within his team, you have to put some of the responsibility actually onto the organisation. They're the ones who decided he was worth that money and maybe paid too much. They're the ones who decided he could do this job, and so some responsibility comes to them. You don't put people in positions where they can't do what you ask them to do. Especially if you then get the sense after the first few times they fail that, oh, they can't do this. That's now the responsibility comes on you. You know the thing, don't get fooled twice, George Bush style. You got fooled once, okay, fair enough. Well, then when he does it a second time, well, don't let it happen the third time. Now it's up to you. You have to take some responsibility for what's happening to you now. And so I always feel like in sports, unfortunately, part of it's the way that certain media aspects within those towns rabble-rouse with the people and try to get their own sort of thing fueled. Well, unfortunately, in that particular sense, people do blame the player a bit too much, whereas they kind of, because they love the organisation or they've always been a fan of that, they kind of deflected away from that. So in this particular scenario, I do blame League to some degree, because he obviously has some unaddressed things, or I'm not sure he actually entirely embraces the fact that he's had these problems. But I also blame CLG, the idea that they keep it on and they just imagine that's going to go well and they just, fingers crossed this time, guys, it's all fine. Like, I'm not vitriolic about it, but just being a realist, they're not in the positions to be where they want to be in these scenarios. Well, at least right now, at least at that tournament we just saw. And some of it's for the same reasons that we've seen in the past that haven't been fixed and haven't truly been addressed. And maybe they've made little inroads, but they haven't really gotten where they need to be. Likewise, if you're in a scenario where... Well, okay, let me put it like this. If you're the player in that scenario and you get that sort of fan reaction, you might actually feel like, oh, this is unfair. Like, I'm a good player. Like, even compared to some of my peers, like this guy in this team, I'm as good as him, or I do as well. You might feel like, okay, I'm a good player. I want to just have a career. I want to get some salary. I want to play some games. I want to be competitive. I want to win some. Oh, I lost some. Okay, that comes with the territory. That's all fine, you know. If that's really the way you're going to frame it in your mind and anything else is just hate, then I'm sorry, it really is the case that, as harsh as it sounds, it is one of those scenarios of like, listen, mate, I don't agree with it being horrible all the time, but it is. If you can't stand the heat, you're going to have to get the fuck out of the kitchen, because this is a high-pressure sport. It's not a social club. It's not an exhibition series where we're just here to watch you do some cool things. It's not the Harlem Globetrotters, mate, where you're just doing tricks and and you toss it like that. And if you miss, who cares, do for another one. It's a fucking NBA Finals or whatever, where if you lose or win or lose, it's life or death, you know. And you fucked up and hit this, or you're the hero and it all goes the other way. In the same way as it's super hateful and horrible the other way around, if you win, you can get showered with adoration. It's really awesome. People are saying, what a great player you are. Like, there's two sides to that, and I'll admit it's not always weighted that fairly. Sometimes you don't get as much praise even if you are a good player as you get from hatred, depending on how they like your personality. That's all true. So even if you feel like you didn't sign up for that, I'm sorry, in a way you do, because that's what it's about, being in the scene. And you have to realise the context of what I described before, of the position and the team you're in, is going to directly play into that, whether you admit it or not, as a player and as fans. As in, if you don't like that fan reaction and you're in CLG or you're in TSM or you're in Curse or whatever, well, I've got a solution for you right now, mate. If you're a good player and you are worth the salary and people would want you on their team, I know exactly how to fix this problem for you, mate. Go and join Evil Geniuses as their mid laner, or go and play top lane for Complexity, or go and become a jungler for Curse Academy, whatever team it is that you're going to be on. One of these teams that's likely, or at least in the past, has been in the bottom half of the table, and their job's really just been avoid elimination entirely and try and get the odd win off their top teams. You know what? For people like Link and for Neon Tonso when he was a top laner, I always said this at the time, those are the perfect place for you. If you can't fix your issues of performance issues, or having issues against certain top players, or just not being able to get across to fans, like actually the way you actually want to be perceived. Like famously in Neon Tonso's case, he said some statements I think just because of social awkwardness came off as like braggadocious statements, like, oh, I'm going to be the best in this position in a year or whatever. If you didn't say those kinds of comments and you just played with your actual level that we've already seen, whether you're Link or Neon Tonso, but for EG or for Colin, I said this at the time when I made my criticisms of Neon Tonso as a player. I said it on these grounds. Like I said, listen, you can't be the top laner of CLG. Like, I'm sorry, they're not going to win any LCS with you as the top laner. Now then, I even said, go play for Complexity, go play for Evil Geniuses. And what's funny is when you see how Inox did on that team, I think that even would have been a good fit. I think they could have used a player like that. I think that actually would have given them a way better chance to win. I think it would have prolonged his career. You know what? Maybe on that team he actually has a little bit of pressure off him. Maybe he gets to have more of a role within the team. Maybe it gets get a bit more focused. He actually gets to have like more funneled into him and get more of his picks. And maybe he gets to show off more, and either he just gets to have a fun career, or maybe actually then he develops and proves himself to the other teams and gets over his issues, that now there's a way back into top teams. Who knows? But the point is, again, you did in a way sign up for it by playing for these teams, and there are options. It's not that it's only that or nothing, and that fans have to be totally nice or totally hateful. There's these wide spectrums and wide options of how people can treat all of this, and it's ridiculous for anyone to pigeonhole everyone else into one box or the other. It's like there's all these different opinions, and no, one guy over here saying this doesn't justify that, and likewise, that doesn't mean that this is hateful, and so's the other thing as well. It's all just a blanket of hate, and as a player, you're just a great guy trying to get along, and why is all this happening to me? Listen, I can totally believe it's horrible. I've had times in my own career where people have said a lot of mean things to me, or whatever, however you want to phrase it. Here's another factor though. You have to, I always stress in my video and my philosophy in life that you have to take some personal responsibility for how things are. Not necessarily what people are doing. Sometimes people are doing horrible things and you can't control that. But you can control your own mind, your own mental space, how you receive that. So in the particular scenario of this, if you're getting all this massive hate and you really can't control it, like it's destroying you completely, and you've tried everything that I might suggest in a second, and really it's just horrible. You just want to be a player who's a good player, and you want to just make some money and have some fans and have cool interactions and all the rest of it. Either go and play for a bottom team like I just suggested now, or you know what, become a streamer. Just make some good money, have some fun there. Hey, maybe you can even go to the odd tournament in like the challenger scene or something. Whatever it is you want to do, play with subs all the time. There are options out there. You're not forced. You don't have to be the starting mid laner of CLG. If that's really not what you want, you know. I mean, listen, if you do, more power to you and try and overcome it. It's great. That's very admirable in its own right. In the particular scenario of if this kind of reaction, like the video. So okay, let's say you play badly in a game. You're one of these guys, and you come on Reddit, and it's just a shit fest of everyone making jokes about you, which, listen, by the way, people can make jokes. I'm sorry, you don't like it, hurts your feelings. That's what fucking jokes are. Most jokes actually are making fun of someone else. The concept behind the majority of humour is it goes along the lines of, you and me, we're different from him in a sense. Haha, look, he's slightly different. That's how the fucking mechanic of how the majority of jokes work. So I'm sorry, it's not fun when you're the guy being pointed out by the two, but guess what? You get your own jokes when you get to point at another guy, and then who knows, maybe you and the original guy point at the other guy later. Like, this is just the way life is. It's like when people go to comedy clubs and they get offended at one thing, like, hey, my dad died in that war. It's like, yeah, but you were laughing at the jokes about fucking Israel and Palestine or whatever, or something from like the 1960s, weren't you? Because guess what? They were horrible as well, but they didn't involve you, so you could see them as just a joke and get out of it. So let's not get crazy and pretend like jokes are somehow off the table and we can't ever have jokes. But with that said, ignoring just the jokes, yeah, there's going to be hateful comments, and some of them are going to be horrible if you read them, and that's really a bad thing. I don't know any way to stop that personally, and banning everyone isn't a solution. Not least since half of these people aren't even like super toxic evil people. They're just the fucking community. They're just the average person you'd meet on the street, who if you could actually hear what he said thinks inside his brain when he looks at you and knows who you are, he'd be thinking the same shit, even if outwardly he'd just be polite and be, hello. It's like inside his mind he might be thinking all that hateful shit. But it's not really that bad within that context when you know that's what sort of is going on. So my point here is, you know that it's going to be bad when you go on Reddit an hour after the loss or a day after the loss. So listen, if you really can't handle it, like I would personally, I often will look at some of this stuff because I've kind of taken it as like I forged my character, and I ensure that I'm not insecure about this fact because I can read that and actually it doesn't bother me because I think there's a purpose behind it, or I understand that sometimes you have to take your lumps and you move on. Whatever that is. Listen, I'm an older person, so I maybe have the luxury of saying I have the experience of going through those things. If you're a young guy and you really can't handle it, don't go on Reddit for an hour. Don't go on Reddit. If you have a really bad game, if I was Link, as soon as I had those bad games, I'd be like, you know what? For real, I'm just not going on Reddit for a week. There's nothing to benefit from me from going on Reddit, and League of Legends subreddit, at least unsubscribe from that if you want. Just go on the other ones, go on fucking StarCraft or MMA or whatever. But don't go on the League of Legends subreddit and start, crucially, if you do, don't fucking start clicking on threads like CLG versus Gambit, final live thread. Like, what do you think's going to be in there? Come on, at this point, you have to be reasonable. No, there's going to be what you think's hatred or hurtful comments, which might be, listen, they might be hurtful. But you have to take responsibility for the fact that when you know there's going to be hurtful comments and the top ones are going to be jokes at your expense, why are you going and clicking on them, mate? I know it'd be nice to believe we could live in a world where you'd go there and it'd top comment be like, oh, Link's having his problems again. I really hope he overcomes it. I hope a CLG like put some money into like a psychologist, and I hope like we can get to the bottom of this. That'd be a great world to live in. It's not the fucking world we live in. Come on, get real. I'll give you an example, okay? say you break up with your girlfriend and this was the love of your life, and even now, even me just saying that now makes you think about her in your mind, and there's a part of you thinks like, oh god, I wish I was still with her, like, oh, I wish he hadn't even said that, like it's making me think about it. You know, if you go on Facebook and you still have her on Facebook, and maybe every now and then you'll see a profile come up, like you'll just see a message from her and it'll make you think about these things again. The logical thing to do when you know that you're not over it still, or it's maybe painful, or it brings up some regret, or some feelings that now are conflicting a little bit, or they're a little bit tender, a little bit painful, is you go, oh, well, I saw that, but you know what, forget about it, just move on with my day. If you then go and click on her profile, what the fuck are you hoping to see on that profile? Best case scenario, maybe she hasn't updated it, at which point you're still probably going to think to yourself like, Jesus, what am I doing? Click on this profile. That alone's probably not going to feel great. We all know what the realistic scenario is. Maybe she's dating some other guy, maybe she's saying some things about her life, maybe she makes some comments, whatever. It's probably going to feel quite bad. So at that point, you have to accept responsibility of that. Okay, listen, it'd be great if she just wouldn't do any of those things and somehow it'd never be an issue, but you can't hope the whole world will change just to benefit you. You have to take personal responsibility, so don't click it, mate. You know what it's going to do to you. You know where that's going to end. Have some restraint. Don't do it. Take some responsibility yourself in that particular scenario. I'm not saying that you deserve this hate or whatever, but to a degree it's to be expected. So with the expectations of anticipating that this will happen, as players and as fans or whatever, manage it. Like if you're a fan who doesn't like to read criticisms of your players, again, what the fuck did you think was going to be in that Gambit versus CLD thread? Are you being ridiculous? Do you like to get angry? Do you like to get indignant? Is that why you clicked on that thread? To read them and go, these goddamn people on Reddit always talking shit on a link. This is horrible. These people are the fucking scum. Maybe you enjoy being mad in that scenario, which by the way is a real valid question you have to ask yourself. Now I know what's going to happen in there. It's not a big deal for me. Anything I say usually in those scenarios, jokes, or I'm critical of the player or management, usually for those sorts of reasons I outlined before. It's not really because I enjoy hatred or anything along those lines. Likewise, if you're going to be a player, especially one who's under scrutiny, I realise in the case of Ian Tonso, I get the sense with him, he just didn't necessarily always know how his words were going to translate over to fans, or he didn't know how people perceived him. Like maybe he saw himself in his own mind differently how other people did. Because the two incidents that really blow my mind, if he's someone who really couldn't handle criticism and hate, aside from the fact apparently he's still clicking on these fucking threads, is the notion that he said that line about he'd only just become a top laner, he'd switched up there. And I get that, yeah, he has this work ethic and all the rest of it. And he made that bold statement that, like, I'm going to be one of the best in the world at this position. I can't remember if he said in a year from now or just left it open. Like, I'm going to be one of the best in the world at this position. If you say something like that, you've now set the fucking expectation level, mate, that you're going to be shy and flame. You haven't even set the expectation level. If you'd have said, you know what, I'm going to be a serviceable top laner who can play Shyvana and be a tank like they want me to do in CLG and we can come third place. If you'd have said that, not really much people could criticise you on the basis of that. But when you say, like, you know what, fuck it, I think I'm going to be the new flame and I'm going to carry this team. If you'd said it like that, obviously I'm being a bit hyperbolic there. Now, when you can't live up to even half of that, well, the gap in that you've helped create is ridiculous. And now, yeah, the people are going to heavily criticise you, even for when there's decent performances and your team does decently, actually. Likewise, when he made that comment about, like, free SM when they beat TSM, yeah, listen, I get it. I'm totally open to trash talk and all the rest of it. Here's what people don't know. When I enjoy certain types of trash talk where it's done in good fun, but you might be a little bit mean, just stinging a guy a little bit, zinger or whatever. Actually, when other players talk shit back to me like that, either in public or private, I even say to them, listen, mate, I love trash talk. So if you want to do that, let's go for it. Let's have some fun. But don't do it, and then if I do it back to you, get all mad like, that's bullshit. That unprofessional. Don't be talking shit. No, game on. If you want to go, let's go. But if you're not that type of person, if you're the sort of person where you know that people talking shit to you or whatever hurts your feelings, well, I mean, let's be responsible here. Don't exacerbate it yourself by putting shit out there that then is going to bring it back on you. Again, this is about responsibility. Why is it okay for you to do that? And then when people go, when the same TSM fans you've sort of provoked a little bit there, get mad at you, you get all fucking cheesed off. Like, well, obviously, what did you expect was going to happen? Yeah, it'd be nice if that wouldn't happen. Or maybe they go too far with it when you just made a cool comment or a cute comment, a little bit of trash talk, and they go way too far. Yeah, that's true. But again, you got to manage that stuff. Likewise, I think that the reason why I separated Reddit out initially there is because Reddit has to be a place where people can post their opinion. So in this particular case, maybe invent their opinion. Like maybe someone was a CLG fan and they had high hopes for this and they thought, oh, we've beaten Rockout, we're going to win the whole tournament. And then they lose to Gambit and in such bad fashion. And then linked us terribly, that some of this they might not even really mean. They might just be a bit upset right now that they had so much hopes for the new lineup. It's gone to shit. They're just venting their frustration. There has to be a place people can do that. And so if you're a player, it's the same argument, okay, is there's this old argument, which is an interesting one to have actually in your mind as like a hypothetical, which is the concept of like, should there be allowed to be men's only clubs in the world? And this isn't a feminism issue to me, because it's always billed as a feminism issue of like, well, that's unfair to keep women out of there. No, one aspect that someone once explained to me that I actually think is pretty valid when I thought about it was they said that they wanted there to be a certain sort of place where it was just agreed, like only men are going to meet here, because part of it is we want to be able to vent maybe about the problems we have with women in our life. I want to just be somewhere where we don't have that in our mind of like, oh, there's a woman here and what's she thinking of me, and then I'm after like the social aspects of dealing differently with someone like that than I would when I'm more comfortable just with guys that I know or guys my age or guys in a similar peer group. I could actually understand it. It was just a bit of a getaway. It was a respite for the mind, or somewhere you could just relax. In that context, I get it. And so Reddit to a degree needs to be that. So actually there's a degree to which players shouldn't be clicking on this just because get the fuck out. It's not for you. If it is, if you want to criticize other people and you want to see all that things, great, come on, be part of the community, and you can do it just like everyone else is doing it, and that's the way it's going. But don't just take the aspect you want and then complain that the other thing isn't there, that you, oh, I want everything my way. Well, don't be ridiculous. Likewise, I'm sure if some of you are regular Reddit users, pro players, let's say not in the context of League of Legends, let's say you went and watched this recent Hobbit movie, and let's say you watched it and you didn't like it, and you thought it was shit, it was boring and a waste of time. If you go to comment, I doubt you'll be like, you know what, the Hobbit movie wasn't all I expected. Some of the aspects of the acting left a lot to be desired, and I also felt like some of the plot points were a little bit cliched and hackneyed within the context of what they could have been. I bet you're like, you know what, oh, that movie fucking sucked, man. That director's such a hack. Like, you have no problem doing the exact same sort of fan behaviour that you're getting super mad at, because it's you that's getting your feelings hurt. Now then, crucially, in that scenario, the guy who's the fucking director of that movie, Peter Jackson, isn't going to go on that Reddit and click on your thread and read it. So actually, it's not that big a deal. It's perfectly fine for you to vent in that way. And this is going to bring me to another aspect of why I say that in the Reddit context, just ignore it for a while. Now, with Twitter, I will admit this is a different scenario, because one of the big problems in Twitter, and this is why I want to go to the people who do say hateful comments and address that, because there are some aspects of fan behavior that are really actually approaching toxic that people don't address, and they lump all the hate themselves in that way with the bad stuff and the good as if it was all just the same. And one thing that people don't address is that, to me, really negative behavior is people who go on Twitter who are just fans, and they go there and they make a reply, they put the person's Twitter tag in so that if he has TweetDeck or something, it's going to show on the mentions bar, and then they send a horrible comment to that person. So they send a comment to Link like, you fucking asshole, you should just get the fuck out of CLG, you piece of shit, you let us all down. That's terrible. That's a really horrible thing to do, actually. Then you know, you're hoping even, maybe as a person like that person's going to see it. You haven't just gone into the Reddit thread and vented there or said something a little bit hyperbolically, but okay, we all know maybe you just meant a criticism. You've actually tried to hurt that person's feeling and get a horrible message to them. That's totally different from just making a Reddit comment or even just making a criticism on even the furthest off scale. That is totally different behavior. Also, likewise, making comments on Twitter where you tag someone's name in it. As soon as you tag someone's name in it, there's a part of me tells me that you want that person to see that. Now, one thing I want people to go back in history and note is in almost no cases in history will you find me talking about players in these teams with horrible, hateful comments, not just jokes or basic criticisms of play, horrible comments or even jokes that are a bit off colour, and tagging the person in there so that they'll get to read it. The majority of these people who I criticise and don't like me don't follow me on Twitter, so they're never going to see my shit unless their followers retweet it that they follow as well. Or people directly go to them with the information, which I'm not doing. I'm not the one doing that. Someone else is taking that message to you, mate. I'd talk to him and tell him, fuck off sending me these shitty messages. I don't want to read stuff like that. Which, by the way, is something I've done myself when people bring me stuff from other people that I don't want to read. I say, listen, I don't want to read criticisms like that. Let me go on my own life, you know. If I want to read that, I'll follow that guy. In this particular scenario, I don't tag those people. I think that's actually a bit toxic as behaviour. I think you should keep it separate in a way where if the person doesn't want to be a part of that, I'm not going to force it on them. But a lot of fans think that's perfectly fine. In fact, what's funny is the sort of fan who got mad at Nien saying that like free SM comment is the guy who then went on Twitter and then tagged him and then said like, fuck you, asshole, you think you're better than TSM, you'll be a failure your whole life. Like, you're way worse than Nien Tonso was there, mate. You have done some terrible, terrible shit by doing that. Even though it might only be in moments, imagine getting a load of messages like that. That's totally out of order behaviour, and that's not acceptable or deserved or to be expected whatsoever. Actually, that's going above and beyond. So I think that should be separated. That, to me, that is approaching hate, actually, that sort of behaviour. Usually the only time I ever tag something like that is I've maybe done it with Loco Doco in the past, is I did it with Loco Doco because he openly talked shit. He was embracing it of like, oh, you want to talk some shit? Let's go back and vote. Right, well, game on then, mate. We're sort of implicitly agreeing here. We're allowed to talk shit, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to go back and forth. So let's go. Start the clock. Get the tallies ready. You've had your shot up. There you go. You took your best shot now. I'll get up, steady myself. I'll take my best shot. That's a different matter entirely, mate. We're open to it, and we're bringing it on, and we're embracing that aspect. It's not just some random person you've never heard of with 10 followers sending some super hateful message to you, and then funnily enough, separating their own behaviour from anything you've done and thinking they're just fine and you're the hateful piece of shit. Well, that's amazing to me. The best one is someone who makes a criticism of a player, like an analyst, and then a fan tells that person, go fucking kill yourself. What a horrible thing to say. Like, is there any... I laugh at that because the lack of self-awareness is fucking hilarious. The idea that, like, yeah, it is terrible to say really horrible things, isn't it? Good job I didn't do that, but if someone was to, and to directly say it to them, they'd be a real piece of shit, wouldn't they? Like, that's hilarious to me. I found a way to switch it to comedy, you know, but I can see how some pro players would get hurt by that. Secondly, as with the Reddit thing, if you have a bad game or a bad play day, I'd just take a day off Twitter. Or if you go on Twitter, only look at the notifications of people you follow. Turn off the mentions bar. What's going to be good in there, mate? Even the praise, even if someone says, I thought you still did all right, that's not really going to amount to match up to all the horrible things, is it? Secondly, Twitter now has a mute function. So this is great. Now you don't even have to block someone and have that guy know that, like, oh, you were offended, and now he gets even more mad at you and types more shit. He doesn't even know that he did it. You just mute him. You never see from him again. Laters, mate. He can make all the comments he wants. He can have a great old time. He can still be a fan of yours in his own ways, an anti-fan or whatever. He can still follow you and have a Twitter number. But you've muted him. Problem solved. I will add one more caveat, actually, that I forgot to say before. Another reason why I can get why some fans are a bit vitriolic is because, and they aren't necessarily admitting this themselves, but if you are someone who's in this position and you could succeed and all this rest of it, first of all, maybe they have unrealistic expectations of what it's like and they think you're living the luxury life and it's awesome and you never have any hardships. Whereas actually, I can tell, even if Link plays fucking Hearthstone, I know he plays League of Legends a fuck ton, he has the scrim and he has the stresses of performance and all this. He's not having just a dandy life where you should just criticise him as if he was wasting it all. But I can understand why a fan who doesn't know about that thinks to themselves, well, he's getting a chance to live his dream and he's throwing it away, and oh, if he just played League more, I can do it too. It's a bit ignorant because they haven't really looked into it, but I can understand to a degree. Secondly, maybe they have a player, maybe they're a big fan of Pobelter and they always think, you know what, if Pobelter just had the chances Link did, he did on X, Y, and Z, and he done that. So again, they've got their own agenda as to why they're upset here. Don't necessarily take it all as if it's all on you. Like, I know people love to have a pity party and assume everyone hates them and is going right at them. Maybe some of these things are just misdirected, misguided in terms of their frustrations that they're outletting here. In terms of going forwards, you also have to acknowledge that it's not that there's hateful people in the community and good people and they're always distinct and you just have to ignore one and watch the other. No, some of the people right now who are being hateful and saying, oh, you piece of shit, I hope you die and all the rest of it, if you ever have some good games or you turn it around or you go to a lesser team and you do well and you come back and you have a resurgence in your career, if you were to have RES tagged that guy, I mean, I wouldn't do this just because it'd probably be annoying to have to read hateful comments, but if you were to do it, you'd see some of those same people who'd said horrible things. When you then had the good games, they'd be saying, oh, what a great play. Oh, I'm glad he turned it around. Oh, forgiving him for when he fucked up that time. All these weird ways of phrasing things that really do show their own agenda and what the fuck they were thinking. But crucially, some of them would just 180 their opinion, and even funnier, if you had RES tagged them, some of them would even completely 180 it, and they'd be like, you know what, you assholes always said he was shit, but I always believed that he would be a good, like, that's just what people are like, man. People are fickle in that sense. The same people who hate you one day can come around, or maybe they hate you because they didn't understand and they had a negative perception, and actually, once they get to know you more, and they see the struggles you come through, and then maybe you do develop, maybe they actually do respect you legitimately in that particular scenario. Also, in terms of how we take people's statements, because again, this is taking responsibility. When someone says hateful comments to you, like I said, the reason why I'm trying to stress that there's other types than just taking it literally at face value is because it's ridiculous to take it at face value. Like if someone says, go kill yourself, mate. One thing that really tilts me is when online celebrities, this is particularly been a thing with a lot of the social justice warrior shit, when people say, I got 400 death threats, you know, people telling me I should be killed. Like, Let's separate real death threats that have a chance of being acted upon or any viability from someone writing the words, I will kill you. Because anyone can do that. In fact, I can play League of Legends now and a guy can write, I will kill you. Well, he doesn't know who I am, what my actual identity is, where I live, how he would go about killing me. He doesn't even know even if I'm a man, if I'm bigger than him, if whatever. He doesn't know fucking anything. That is so worthless. That may as well just be him bashing anything on his keyboard and I happen to take from it that he'll kill me. Maybe he's fucking Russian and he doesn't even understand what those words mean. He just heard it in a movie. Who knows what the context is? The point is, there's no point me putting undue significance on that in itself and then pretending like he's the one who made me have that, oh my god, he's going to kill me. People go too far with that. If there are real statements, let's treat them like real things. Let's report them to police. Let's make sure Twitter gets these people disciplined. Let's have them banned on Reddit or whatever if they keep repeatedly doing these things. Yeah, let's have things in place to get rid of really bad elements. But when people are just doing it in a stupid way, where that's just someone who's 17 doesn't know how to communicate properly, or this guy's just going way too far and he's pissed off right now, but actually maybe even feels bad about the next day, let's separate those out and not pretend like they're the same thing entirely. Because that is an online phenomenon of even the pity aspect of the victim. They've gone too far. They're being dishonest themselves, trying to sell it the other way. The same way as the idiot who says go kill yourself is being totally unreasonable by saying that because you lost the fucking game of League of Legends on Oriana or whatever. We should definitely separate the line of people joking, people criticising, valid criticisms, less valid criticisms, trash talking that's allowed, trash talking that's not as much allowed, and then obviously hatred, and then going into like really being a total piece of shit and being actually really negative towards people. There are solutions though. You can limit the extent that this can impact on your consciousness. I always think you're responsible for your own mental space. That's why I love the Twitter mute feature. If you use RES, Reddit Enhancement Suite, there's an option to ignore users and it'll just block their comment out. You won't see it anymore. There are things in place where you can clean up. You can kind of get rid of some of the pollution in that mental space. You can't just hope that the world will be different and, it's so unfair. Why don't things change? Listen, that's all great. But you can take some measures yourself. So I think I've unpacked it quite a lot there because it sounds initially like, it's just hateful, it's just this. There's a lot of subtleties to it, a lot of nuance. So I hope everyone involved in this sort of scenario, when they think about these things, it's not necessarily that they learn something from me, but they just see that there's more going on than just something so black and white as hate.